All right, welcome back to Communication Makeover. I am excited to continue this conversation with Kate. You know, going back to the original problem that we laid out, as a business owner, as a leader, you've got your customers, you've got your team members, you got board members, you got investors, you got all these different people in different situations that you actually need to talk through. So I'm going to bring Kate back on and really let's dive deeper into how do you do that effectively. I want us to lay out as much of a roadmap as we possibly can on how to situationally connect your communication in whatever that situation is actually calling for. So, Kate, so you deal with this all the time with the leaders that you coach. Where do we start with solving this problem? If someone is at home and they're self coaching, where do they need to begin in order to diagnose what's going on in this disconnection, in this stuck feeling that they're going through?
Yeah, I mean, one of the first steps I would take is to think about, is this happening in a particular setting? And so is this happening with one person where you're thinking of this one person, I'm really not connecting with them or I'm not communicating with them effectively, or is this happening in a group setting? Because what I'll do with clients, let's say when I work with investing clients and they often have to present to an investment committee, and so there might be 6 or 8 people in that meeting. And we will map out each of those people and try to understand what we can understand about them. And I use a two-step process where we say we're going to identify what we know about this person and especially what we know about their communication preferences. And then we're going to think about how we can influence them more effectively. So how if I know knowing that they are like this, then how do I need to adjust the way I'm communicating with them? So we map out who we're talking about and then we do identify and influence.
That is such an intentional approach because we our initial because like we said before, because we're so apt to be negative towards ourselves, we think, oh, I'm just my whole life is horrible. I'm not connecting across the board. But you said if you can be specific about that situation, what are they looking for and what would really influence that person? It sounds like just the power of asking the right question and getting specific, it sounds like.
Yeah, and I think probably paying attention, right? So one of the things I hear all the time, the feedback that I'll hear about clients is, they need to work on reading the room. And
Mm,
that's one of those pieces of feedback that I think is well-intentioned, but pretty unhelpful, right? Because what does that mean? Everybody wants to read the room, but I don't know how. And for people who aren't reading the room, they don't know what they're missing in the reading of the room, or they don't know what that
yeah.
means. And so this is really what I think about when I think about reading the room is it might be thinking about each person in the room and identifying like, okay, am I watching them real time to get their feedback, but also am I planning ahead of time? Like how do they like to communicate? Do they tell a story? Are they
Yeah.
really direct? What's their energy like? Is it really like this or is it really like this? Like that's what reading the room means is understanding your audience and starting to match them, but where people get that feedback, they just don't know, or when you're not landing, but you don't know why you didn't land. And so it's really about being intentional to unpack all of that and figure out what's the data that we have and how can we turn that data into a strategy.
And this really communicates it's the little things because it's not that that cliche is incorrect, but going two more layers deeper, like three questions deeper into that, that's what makes it powerful. It's not just read the room, you just say that blankly, like, oh yeah, but how do I do that? But when you just you built a framework just then for
Yeah.
how to read the room, and that makes it simple. The framework makes it simple.
Yeah, all of a sudden it feels like something that you could actually execute on, right? And
Yeah.
sort of populate. Like if I give you the blank spaces, like, okay, you fill in the names of the people, and then you kind of tell me what's currently happening with them. And then, how do they write their emails or what do they do when they're presenting? And then all of a sudden you realize you had a lot more of the answer and a lot more of the data than you thought you did. And then it becomes pretty easy to diagnose why you're not reading the room, whereas before it kind of seemed like very cloudy, very unclear. And then all of a sudden the picture comes into focus.
I love that. Is there one more? What walk me down the keep walking me down the path. Reading, yeah, you got to read the room, yeah, and analyze. Well, what's going to connect with? Is there anything else there?
So I think that people overlook how much data you're getting from people in the way that they communicate to you. Well, even
Okay.
if we take emails, right? We all probably get too many emails, but people have really different styles for how they write your emails. So if I'm getting the like, I don't think I'm communicating well with this person or we're not landing, and then I'll pull up the person's email and my client's email and say, let's look at how different or how similar these two emails are. Right. And I've done this with clients and we actually had a really good laugh about it because they're so different. So it might be something like the email they wrote is like 4 paragraphs, it's just all narrative text. And then the email they got is 2 lines and 2 or 3 bullet points and then no sign off. Right. And so then you look at it and when you compare them, you go, oh, wow, this is a radically different way of communicating. And maybe that's why we're missing each other or we're just not vibing. And so sometimes it's something very simple, like actually comparing it to say, okay, how can I make my style a little more like what they're probably implicitly expecting from me? Because they're telling you what their expectation is in the way they're writing to you.
That is brilliant. You almost mirror that person. If they're talking bullet points, then talk in bullet points. If they talk in paragraphs, then talk in paragraphs.
Yes. Yes. Because there's this communication is so subjective, right? I have people who say, don't say, I used to have someone who would say, don't say good morning. Don't say, hope you had a good weekend. Don't anything. Like, don't send an email to me unless you are asking me to do something. And then I could send someone else the email I would send her and they'd go, oh my God, is Kate mad at me? Right? Like, and they're not wrong. None of those emails are wrong, but they're definitely going to set you up for a bad exchange if you're not paying attention to who you're sending it to and what they like.
I had a large client group that was based in Nicaragua, and if you sent them a message that went straight to the point, they thought you were angry. You had to
Yeah.
start every text, every message with "Good morning, how was your day?" Pause, and then you go into it because culturally, that's just you. You need to be. They said you need to start everything with sugar. They said.
I like that. Yeah. And once you start to ask yourself, that's one of the steps in the identifies. I ask my clients this, like, hey, how do they start emails? How do they start meetings? Do they start with a
Hmm.
few minutes of small talk? Or are they diving right into your agenda? And if you've worked with someone, you don't have to have a lot of data points to know the answer to that. And then you can go, okay, well, when I'm starting a meeting with them, do I dive right into the agenda? Would they usually start with small talk? Okay, that's a mismatch. And that's something I could fix that would probably improve my trust and my rapport with that person.
So, would you say it's intentional observation and
Mhm.
intentional reaction?
Yes, exactly. So that's once you start to identify, and the thing clients say all the time is, oh, there's this whole language out there that felt very coded and now I understand it, but it's actually not that hard to understand. Once you start paying attention and trying to identify preferences, they become very, very obvious very quickly. And then you say, okay, once I've identified it, now I know how to influence people differently or how I might need to just adjust differently for different people.
I love that. That's absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for the time, Kate. I've loved this. Has been powerful.
Thank you. This has been really fun. So I want to tell you a little bit about Coach Select. So we are a coach matching platform. We have spent years developing a proprietary behavioral science-based system, which is a big fancy way of saying that we can sort the world of coaches and help you find a coach who's compatible for you. So we have a vetted network of about 60 coaches. And when a client comes in, we say, okay, who is this person going to match with? We can do better than a Google search. We can do better than a referral. So we're going to find you a curated set of 3 to 4 coaches for you to interview who are fit for your industry, your goals, your budget, all your personality, all these factors. Let you interview them and let you decide if one of our coaches is the right fit for you.
So now you've experienced the power of coaching. You just watched Kate and her techniques. And it's interesting because it's the techniques that open up the power of discovery. You're peeling back the onion, learning about yourself. It's the little things and knowing that there's choices. Sometimes when we're in a situation and maybe we feel stuck in a situation, it's hard to see the forest for the trees. You've heard that expression. It's the coach and the power of coaching that draws out whatever it is that maybe you didn't think that you had the choice. Maybe it's a new direction, it's a new way of thinking. So I like to step back and say, when it comes to coaching and celebrating coaching, that it's all about choices and they're compounded. And when we go in a direction that feels right and you're moving along, it's a compound effect, and positive gets compounded. So just remember, it's always the little things and that discovery. And next week, you're going to see me in action because I'm going to do a coaching session with Brooke Ellis. She is a colleague and a friend. And Brooke's particular situation has to do with getting on stage in front of 3,000 people and working through why is it that Brooke can go on a live stream or she can be in front of maybe 500 people. But when there's 3,000, something changes. So I think that's really interesting because there's confidence in what we do and in certain situations, but you never know where a situation can take a turn and can be more challenging. So you'll see that next week. Hope you'll join us then and see you again soon on Communication Makeover.